Hi, hello, what is up? What's going on? The first ever edition of 10K Live, our first go at a live streamed version of our 10,000 Pitches podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jeremy Rushing alongside Dominic Jose Bazonio. Now, Dominic, we are going to do something different. Not only is it the first 10K Live, but it's the first time we've sort of meshed 10,000 Pitches and Post Loons into one sort of thing here with this live stream. So a lot to get to. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to finally be on Post Loons. We talked for a lot, even before I ended up joining for 10K Pitches. We talked for a long time about me trying to do an episode, and it never worked out. So I found a way.
Hey, we found a way to make it happen. We had to basically mix the podcast and Post Loons together, but we've done it. Here we are. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. A lot to get to a little bit later on. Matt Pravratsky from Equal Time Soccer is going to be joining the stream to talk basically all things women's soccer in the state, mainly Gophers soccer recap. Their season, unfortunately, over, not advancing to the Big Ten tournament. So we'll kind of recap their season, obviously the first season with Aaron Chastain at the helm. So a lot to get to with him. As usual, we'll do the Post Loons thing for Minnesota United, a thorough recap of not only the loss against Vancouver last night, but also the LAFC draw. We'll get to that as well. And then in addition to the Gopher Soccer Chat with Matt, we'll also talk Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference play as they're wrapping up the season. Just a few games left there as Bemidji State undefeated right now. So we'll talk about Bemidji State, Minnesota State, and all that with Matt, along with the latest with Minnesota women's soccer. Obviously, Matt, part of the ownership group there. And not to mention, Dom, St. Thomas men get their first D1 win. So a lot to discuss in that regard too. So a whole slate of Minnesota soccer content to get to over the next hour and a half or so. We appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching on Twitter, go ahead and give us a like and a retweet. If you're trying to leave a question or comment on Twitter, you're going to have to go to YouTube to do that. So go to YouTube, just search 10,000 Pitches. You'll be able to find us and find the stream here and drop your questions and comments in there. Also give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube as well. Yes, just as Dominic is showing you right there. We get to do some visual stuff. It's weird because usually we we wear certain stuff or we make certain gestures and nobody can see. But now,
shout out to Spam FC, by the way.
Hey, love that Spam FC hat. ShopSpamFC.com for all your great Spam FC merchandise. Shameless plug there for our friends over at Spam FC. Doing great things with their scholarship program. Little shameless plug for a future episode of 10K.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have the Spam FC guys back on probably sometime in mid-November to talk about the latest money that they've been donating to their scholarship foundation. It's fantastic. So when you go to shopspamfc.com, you're actually helping them fund their scholarship foundation too, which is obviously huge. All right. All that being said, Dom, let's get into the soccer content, and we are going to kick it off with Post Loons, I guess. This is kind of weird. It's like 10,000 Pitches and Post Loons in one, but we're going to kick off this episode of 10,000 Pitches with Post Loons. So as always in Post Loons, if you have a question or comment, drop that in the chat. The hotter the take, the more likely it is that we're going to put it up on the screen here and talk about it. So the first match we're going to discuss, we'll get to the loss in Vancouver last night just a little bit, but we're going to recap kind of the week as a whole. So obviously it started with the 1-1 draw at home against LAFC. LAFC's lone goal coming from a rare miscue from Tyler Miller, although now that we've seen that the miscues have not been so rare for Tyler Miller this week, we'll get to that in a little bit. But the rare miscue from Tyler Miller lets the ball go through the wickets off of a free kick from Christian Arango. LAFC goes up 1-0. They do end up, the Loons, getting it back via a goal off a rebound from Ozzy Alonso in the second half, but weren't able to get that one to put them ahead. All in all, though, Dominic, I was looking at this. I wasn't too pessimistic following the 1-1 draw. I know LAFC was down Carlos Vela and a couple others, but they had been in good form and obviously have continued to be in good form since that Minnesota United match. So I wasn't too concerned or worried about the 1-1 draw at the time with LAFC. How are you feeling coming out of that one?
Yeah, I think it's the same as you're saying. At the time, I felt relatively good about it. Certainly, you'd rather be the side that came back in a draw, for example, and of course
Mhm.
they're a very good team. They destroyed, was it Seattle, the game after that, they had a
Yeah.
fantastic home game. But I do think that the way this week played out, it ends up being a very good example of the thing that happens sometimes where um, the way you feel about a result is more affected by the next game than the game you're thinking about. So
Yeah,
the way the
for sure.
Vancouver game ended up going, which we'll talk about, I think changes the significance of this result.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very weird to
so,
be trying to look at this LAFC match through kind of an impartial lens,
right,
considering we're coming off such a disappointing loss to Vancouver.
right,
But and you're absolutely right; it does kind of change the way you view it. But at the time, I mean, I said it on Post Loons after the LAFC match. I wasn't too worried. Minnesota didn't play all that bad either.
right.
It was very much a stalemate. I think the 1-1 draw was sort of the deserved result in that match. But at the same time, it would have been really nice to get 3 points at home
Yeah,
against an LAFC side that was down their best player and a couple others and is on the outside looking in. On paper, you should probably win that match. You're down Roman Mettenair for the red card, and then coming into Vancouver, you're down Chase Gasper. So it's kind of as we talked about, Dominic. You move one piece from the puzzle, and all of a sudden the quality. Now it wasn't a full on absolute train wreck. This 1-1 draw, but at the same time, I think it was there. That match was there for the taking. Had they been at full strength, who knows?
yeah, and I think part of, to your point about taking a piece out and it all fall apart, falls apart. That's the way you say
There you go.
it.
You got it.
I think something that I was thinking about after these last two games. Obviously, we're missing each of our fullbacks in the two respective matches. Um, there's a unique aspect to that. Take out a piece, it falls apart. In that it's not even necessarily that there's like a crucial player that we're worried about missing. I mean, there is, Reynoso, for example. Obviously, we would like to have him all the time, and there are pieces like that. But it's kind of across the pitch. There are just many spots where if someone's gone, it feels like the team is significantly worse, which is maybe more concerning because then it becomes not so much about, oh, we're relying on this one guy. It's more just a lack of depth entirely, or a
Yeah,
lack of players being able to move into different positions. Like, for instance, Dotson was playing out of position, so it's not necessarily a depth thing in the sense of a bench player, but it's how we make up for losses. Um, that's almost more concerning to me because then it feels like it's not just, oh, we're losing our number 10 or our star striker. It's, did we lose anybody? Oh, we're in
yeah,
trouble. And with all due respect, Chase Gasper is a player that often fans have been very critical of and maybe questioned. So even a player that not many fans necessarily have a huge amount of confidence in, he leaves and it still affects the team in such a drastic way. So that's very concerning to me.
yeah. You saw, and we'll transition to talking about the Vancouver game now, because that I think directly kind of leads to what was the big issue in the Vancouver game. It was an absolute dumpster fire along the back line. Like we can talk about the offensive issues and the goal scoring as a whole this season has been the issue for Minnesota United, but and it was an issue last night. Obviously, you have to get a Fernando Adi stoppage time goal to keep Vancouver from getting a clean sheet, right? But
Right.
there was some serious issues along the back line last night. Bakaye Dabasi probably played his worst match in a Minnesota United uniform last night. Tyler Miller, another woeful, just kind of looked like he didn't know what to do on that initial goal.
Yeah.
That ended up being a Michael Boxall own goal. And Boxy played probably the worst game I've ever seen him play last night as well. So it was just all these issues. And I don't necessarily know if 100% we can trace this back to losing Chase Gasper on the left, but I'm trying to follow my logic here in terms of Chase Gasper, for his faults, has been one of your most reliable players this season. Second only in minutes, I believe, to Will Trapp for the Loons this season. That's very much a comfort. I'm sure, it's a comfort to a guy like Dibassy to know that he has a guy like Chase Gasper alongside him, where Dibassy knows I just have to do my job and the guy next to me is going to do his for the most part. Gasper has had his issues. We've talked about those in length. When you remove that piece and all of a sudden you have a guy in Hassani Dotson playing on left back where has he ever played left back for Minnesota United? I know he's played right back. I know he's played left wing. I do not remember him playing left back, and I'll probably get corrected in the chat. So if he has played left back for Minnesota before, let me know. I have not seen it, or do I remember it happening before? That sort of removes that comfort factor for Dibassy, right? And so maybe he's distracted by that in terms of, I need to worry more about what's going on to my left because we have a more inexperienced piece here. I need to maybe focus some, where you normally fully focus on myself. I need to take some of that and focus more on potentially covering for him. Right. And that's nothing against Dotson, but he's rarely played there. That's not a position he's used to playing. Right. Maybe that's the cause. And maybe that has a domino effect that goes to Chase Gasper, that goes to Tyler Miller. Roman Metnair didn't play great either. It was the whole back line and your goalkeeper, right? That really were what stuck out to me as the issues. Goal scoring was an issue once again. It's been an issue all season, but the back line is where we saw significant disorganization. It just seemed like everything was out of whack. I don't know if you can trace that to Chase Gasper, but I've tried to provide a logic train to maybe trace it back there. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to know for sure, the intricate web that leads to like a game like yesterday. But I will say that I'm sure that losing such a consistent presence affects even just the sort of synergy of that back line, just in a general sense. You noted how consistently he's been playing for us. When you have someone that's just there so often, in a team that in many other positions had quite a bit of rotation, you have to imagine that everybody else becomes so used to their presence, their style, how they read the game, how they move, what they go in on, what they don't go in on as a defender. So having that be different on the road in a big game, a game that matters as much as that game did, I can imagine that would potentially mess with sort of the processing speed of the back line. And you were mentioning that obviously the initial thing to focus on is the attack, and in reality it might have been more the back line that was the problem. To add to that, for as much worth as people want to put in statistics like this, you look at like the expected goals for that game. One of the apps that I used had something along the lines of, I think Vancouver had like 0.7 and we had like 2 point something, under 3. You look at that and the first thing you say is, oh, well, we scored less than we were supposed to.
Yeah.
But look at the fact that we conceded 2 goals against a team that statistically wasn't even going to score. That to me is actually more concerning. And obviously the own goal in the moment feels kind of like a silly mistake by multiple players. But if you look at the chance that led to that own goal, it was horrible defending. The amount of space allowed, the fact that the initial shot didn't go in was kind of just a matter of Miller having a decent reaction and the shot itself maybe not being the best idea. And so it plays out the way it plays out. But realistically, 9 times out of 10, that goes in on the initial effort. And so you might as well write it off as just a normal goal in a way, at least in terms of how the defense allowed it to happen. So, yeah, it was a really concerning night in terms of movement, reading situations, obviously just allowing goals out of a game that statistically didn't have goals in it for Vancouver. And a team that generally is not a high-scoring team in general. It's very concerning, and it's concerning even more so when you look at the teams that we have to play for the remainder of the season who have a much better scoring record than them.
100%. Guys, if you have any thoughts on Minnesota United's loss at Vancouver last night, please drop those in the chat just as you would on a normal Post Loons broadcast. Questions, comments, thoughts, takes, drop them in the chat. We'd love to respond to those here on the show. Thank you so much to everybody watching. If you're watching on Twitter and you'd like to leave a comment, you're going to have to hop over to YouTube to do that because we're not going to be able to see it with the StreamYard platform that we're using to host. So continuing to break down this Vancouver loss, one thing I want to talk about that didn't necessarily have to do with anything on the field is just the atmosphere at BC Place last night. These 9 p.m. kickoffs are normally hard to get through. And I'm not going to lie, Dom, there is a reason why there was no post Loons last night. That's because I'm sitting there on my couch watching the match. It's about like the 35th minute. I blink, or I thought I blinked. I opened my eyes from what I thought was a blink, and it was the 65th minute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Took a little.
So you missed both Vancouver goals then?
I missed both. I thought I missed one.
Or maybe just one. Just one. Yeah.
I saw the second one, so may have been earlier than the 65th. I saw the second one. I definitely missed the first one. So I had to rewatch the game today earlier before we, at least the part I missed before we went live here. But so to my point though, these 9 p.m. games are already tough to get through. Yeah. But when you add playing the game basically at a half empty shopping mall, that's basically what it felt like. Like it's brutal, man. And especially when Minnesota, your team, Minnesota United, puts the performance they put together, just a really, really tough match to get through all in all.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you might assume that a sort of lackluster home environment would hurt the home team more, but it kind of felt like Vancouver found their energy within all that, and we didn't. So
yeah. I mean, that atmosphere, though, I think relative to what Vancouver had been playing in at home and, where I can't remember where they were playing before they were able to go back to Vancouver.
Utah, I think, right?
Yeah, you're right. It was RSL because actually the first time Minnesota United played Vancouver was at RSL. That's empty stadium, right? Even when they went back to Vancouver, I believe it was like 25% capacity, if that. So last night, compared to 19,000 at Allianz, or even the 14 or 15,000 that it's been at Allianz over the last 3 weeks, like that might be great for Vancouver, right? That might seem like a good atmosphere relative to what they've been playing in all year. But if you're a Minnesota United fan, it seems dead.
Yeah, and it's probably important to keep in mind that we are pretty lucky just in general, regardless even of COVID. We're pretty lucky with the atmosphere that we have at Allianz. That's not a consistent thing for some teams, both in terms of numbers, but also the actual noise and atmosphere of it. That's not something every team has.
No. So as we mentioned, all in all, we've kind of broken down this Minnesota United performance. It was not great, especially from a backline standpoint. It was a decent first half, all things considered. But right before halftime, you give up that own goal, and that's when things really started to snowball. And then the second goal, and this was in the 63rd. So I woke up at some point before the 63rd minute. Not too far from that though. So this was the sequence that obviously decided the game and could decide Minnesota United's season right here. Unu is able to get in a good goal scoring position. He's able to get a shot off past the keeper, and it's a wide open net, but it goes off the inside of the post. And then immediately the Whitecaps bring a counter, and Brian White finishes off to double the lead. And that is where you go down 2-0. And that is really that's the gut punch right there. You go from we should have scored to, man, we're down 2. And that really, I just said it, but that could be what knocks Minnesota United out of the playoffs. That's a 6-point swing right there.
Yeah. I think after the goal, if I recall correctly, they cut to the Minnesota bench, and you just see Adrian Heath just kind of like laying back, speechless, because he probably realizes how much deeper the hole's just gone off of a very strange series of plays to lead to that goal. Yeah, it's tough to criticize a missed goal in which essentially the player doesn't really miss, but it bounces on unluckily and doesn't go over the line. But again, when you have a game where the chances were so much in favor of Minnesota. There were so many chances wasted or momentum wasted. When you finally have that chance that realistically should be the thing that goes over the line, and then you still can't get it through, it does leave you asking questions about just like what does this front line need to have the motivation and the focus to get that over the line in such an important game where they surely understand that they really, really need a goal. Yeah, it's concerning. Obviously, there's some bad luck to it, but it is concerning when even those big open chances are still not going over the line.
Yeah. There was one good thing to come from this goal, though, Dominic.
There was.
It was
maybe the best thing.
Yeah. Yes. If there's a circumstance that's going to knock Minnesota United out of the playoffs, if it spawned this tweet, that's actually something I might be okay with, and I'm actually going to bring it up here.
There you go. Show the people because they need to see it.
Left foot, right foot, head. He just finishes everything. Brian White could finish while thinking of the Queen.
Can I say, by the way, right away, the most amazing thing about this tweet is that they left it up for like 2 hours.
I'm so disappointed they took it down. So if you're not on Twitter or you didn't know, so this is the tweet that the Vancouver Whitecaps official account put out after the Brian White goal to put Vancouver up 2-0. Now, if you're wondering, I don't even know how I'm gonna like try to describe this. If you're wondering what the joke is here or like what the humor is here, I think it's a joke in how like think of baseball, think of cold showers, certain things you have to do to maybe prolong certain activities. I think because there's technically a queen in Canada, I believe that one of the running jokes is like, oh, think of the Queen. Right.
And the Vancouver Whitecaps want you to know about that.
Yes, that's the joke here. It's amazing. I'm really, if you're going to roll with it, right? Like if you're going to post this, I feel like if you're the Caps, and I don't know if they got pressure from sponsors or the league or whoever to remove this. They may have, but I almost feel like you just have to just steer into the skid here because this is amazing. I mean, this had more people were talking about this than anything else that happened in MLS last night. I mean, amazing.
Because it was up for quite a while. I don't have the exact amount of time, but they didn't delete it for quite some time. I was convinced, I guess they're just going to leave it. Yeah. But then I woke up the next morning. I kind of drifted off from focusing on it, and I woke up the next morning and I see that's been deleted. But really impressive work. Well, apparently not according to the Vancouver admins, but impressive work from whoever thought of that so short notice. And I have to say, it's probably going to be a travesty that whoever wrote that tweet is probably going to get worse punishment than Tim Melia did for assaulting a person live on MLS.
Yeah, that's the real tragedy here, to be honest. I really, really hope that the admin doesn't just, if you're gonna give him anything, give him a slap on the wrist. I don't want to see this guy get fired, suspended. Although if he does get let go, we may have to scoop him up here at 10K.
Might just
and we may have to start a Patreon to pay for his social media service here, because that's the type of energy we're looking for. But just amazing stuff here. So the Brian White goal, although it made us sad, it did spawn one of the greatest soccer tweets in the history of soccer tweets. So there is a silver lining there. As we mentioned, of all people, and you can cross this off your bingo card, Minnesota United fans, Fernando Adi checks in and he puts the Loons on the board in stoppage time with the most sloppy, Minnesota United type goal of all time. This was like a mistake that this ball went in the back of the net, but somehow it did. Fernando Adi gets credit for it. Minnesota United's on the board, and I mean, good for him, I guess, for opening his accounts.
Yeah, and hey, maybe that goal differential change will even be important at some point. Who knows? But
That's actually very, very true
yeah,
because Minnesota United, I believe, is at a -3 goal differential right now.
yeah,
But I do think it's wins that is the first playoff tiebreaker, and that is
right.
why RSL is ahead of Minnesota United in the standings right now. But yeah, a goal differential that could play a factor. Who knows? And that would be ridiculous, honestly. A Fernando Adi mistaken stoppage time goal somehow is
Yeah,
what if there's like a triple tiebreaker scenario, that's what gets the Loons over the line into the playoffs. That's I don't know. I don't even know if I'd watch. It would seem fraudulent. So to
a
be
little
honest.
bit. My concern, to be honest, I don't want this to come off extremely harsh, but I was already a little about having him join the team,
Mhm.
in terms of the potential benefits of that. And I just get the feeling from this that like this feels like this is going to be his version of when like Kai Kamara got like one penalty for us the time he was here, and then he never scored again.
Yeah.
Like it just feels like you bring that guy in. It's like, is he really going to be what we need? And then he gets like that one goal to kind of justify the presence, and then that's going to be it. I mean, he doesn't even get that many minutes to play, so in his defense, it's not like he has a lot of opportunity to score. But uh, yeah,
At
I'm
least
not.
at least Kai Kamara had the pedigree though. Like
Yeah,
there was like an obvious, like clear reason for him to be on this roster.
yeah,
A, we were down a crap ton of strikers, and
yeah.
B, he served as a mentor. Like shoot, he mentored
Oh, for sure.
Alfonso Davies in Vancouver,
Yeah.
right?
No, and
So
Kai Kamara
like
is like
and
a historic player for this league. So I
yeah,
I I don't mean that to be a diss to him, but it was like, there were some questions about him coming in, other people leaving, and so on and so forth. And he gets like I think it was one penalty in league play at least. That was his only
yeah.
league play goal. And then nothing else comes of it. This feels like that, Adi's version of that, and being maybe a less high profile player, it's a less high profile goal in terms of finishing. But yeah, I have a lot of questions about him joining the team to begin with. The goal
Mhm.
maybe helps, maybe doesn't.
Yeah, I didn't know much. You know, I wasn't turned off by the signing, but obviously it wasn't like a huge
Yeah,
impactful thing to me either. And then all of a sudden he just keeps getting put on the field late in matches, and to my eye, not providing much, if any, impact at this point. So, but he did score last night, so maybe that'll get him more minutes. Who knows?
yeah,
But as we mentioned, Loons are now 8th in the West after the loss, level on points with 7th place RSL, but RSL does own that most number of wins tiebreaker. So now you're on the outside looking in if you're Minnesota, and you have two matches that are not going to be easy down the stretch here. You have a home match Sunday against SKC, which, if you ask me, they should be without Tim Melia, but that's neither here nor there. And then you have the season finale Sunday, November 7th at LA Galaxy. And because of the loss, because you only got 1 point out of this week, you probably need all 6 points here.
right.
And that's not an easy task. I mean, if they
Mm.
do it, they'll definitely have earned a spot. But based off what we've seen and based off, I mean, I'm not saying they can't do it, but it just you put yourself from this week, you've put yourself in a really, really unenviable position.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be great if they end up finding the points and making it, but the way this is all played out, it very much fulfills conversation we had on a previous episode. I guess it was the last episode. It was after the Union win, at which I said something on the lines of like, "This is all great. So the Union are a very good team, and it's great that we showed we can beat them, and that shows some playoff potential to me. But if this next week of stuff doesn't go well, then that Union win is just a cool moment in an otherwise dreary end of the season, and it kind of loses all of its importance, because these two games realistically were more important because of being in conference and so on and so forth. Um, and it went the way I wasn't hoping, but the way I was kind of suggesting, which is that we dumped most of the points we could get out of the two games. So it's really starting to feel like we might not make it, and even if we did, I would have lost most of my optimism about what we could do.
That's the thing, though. If you get all 6 points here and make the playoffs, all of a sudden that confidence has to be there, right? Because you've beaten SKC and you've beaten the Galaxy to get there. Now, all of a sudden, people are going to be riding high on confidence again. And to your point last week, Dom, that is when it all comes crashing down. As soon as we reach a certain confidence threshold with this team, it just all of a sudden you get the week that you had this week. You almost called it.
Yeah, well, that's why I said my concern was that this team wins games they're not supposed to and loses games they're supposed to win, pretty consistently, or throw a draw in there, but doesn't achieves things they're not supposed to and doesn't achieve things they're supposed to. And so look, if they manage to get the points they need and they make that impressive run the last 2 games, then maybe that improves my confidence a little bit. But all the while in the back of my head, I'm going to be saying to myself, but they just proved to you that they have the same problem they've had for the last 2 years. So whatever is about to happen, you're going to have to know the whole time that it might just completely fall off the hill randomly. The moment that the momentum feels too much on our side or something. Because you should be beating Vancouver. You probably should have beat LAFC. Didn't beat either of them. After what seemed like such a momentous moment of being Philadelphia, it just the roller coaster is just continuing to me, and the roller coaster the high point, it might bump us into the playoffs, but then I just know that it's going to dip again. So I'm not, unless something changes, and there can always be change. I have a lot of pessimism about what happens if we even make the playoffs, what those first couple rounds look like.
It just all comes down to the fact that we just can't have nice things, Dom.
We live in Minnesota, and it's not the best state for professional sports, is it?
It's not, no. And I don't know. Anyways, let's move on. We have Matt Pravatsky waiting backstage. I don't want to keep him waiting too much longer. So before we get to him and before we get to talking everything women's soccer across the state of Minnesota, let's shout out our good friends over at 9th Street Soccer and Coffee. If you have not gotten your Golazo blend from 9th Street, that's their signature blend with their friends over at Dogwood Coffee. This stuff is amazing. I actually had to go get a coffee grinder because of this. Normally I just buy the Aldi brand coffee that you get. But so I got some of the Golazo brew, not realizing that it was coffee beans and I didn't have a coffee grinder. So, but that's how good the stuff is. Like, it's worth going to get a coffee grinder to go drink this coffee. It's really, really good stuff. Dogwood Coffee knows what they're doing, and 9th Street did a great job by partnering with them, and this stuff is awesome. So go check it out. 9thstreetmpls.com. If you actually follow them on Twitter at 9th Street MPLS, the link in bio is where you can actually get the Golazo brew from our friends over at 9th Street. So what's going on at 9th Street besides this awesome coffee is they have 40 plus and women's only pickup available. These are new pickup options over at 9th Street. So, if you're 40 plus and you don't want to be trying to keep up with 25, 24, 23-year-old guys who are just pushing the pace and running circles around you, 9th Street has a place where you can, maybe play with some people your own speed. That seemed very, very mean. So I don't mean it like that, I promise. But 40 plus pickup, women's only pickup available as well. And if you want to book a field, whether you have a team, you want to get some indoor practice time in because the weather is going to turn to crap very, very soon. It's a miracle that it hasn't already. These bookings are filling up extremely fast. And I'm not just saying that. That's not like a sales thing. Like, it's indoor soccer space is like a premium here in Minnesota in the winter if you haven't experienced it before. So if you want to book a field, book a half field, whatever, over at 9th Street, you got to do so now. 9thstreetmpls.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 9th Street MPLS. Big thanks to the guys over at 9th Street Soccer and Coffee for being our title sponsors of Post Loons. And we're happy to talk about them here on the 10K crossover episode. All right. It is now time to bring in Mr. Matt Pravatsky from Equal Time Soccer. Matt, how you doing tonight, man?
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeremy. I always appreciate the chance to chat women's soccer. Dominic, I think first time we've been virtually meeting each other than on Twitter, so happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to meet you too. I've been following you for a long time, and we've talked on social media, but I don't think we've ever talked in person or virtually.
Matt, now you just got off of a live stream, hosting a live stream. Now you're guesting a live stream. So the old back to back. So we're going to talk Gophers. We're going to talk what's going on with MNWOSO. We're going to talk about NSIC. But you just actually got off a live stream with St. Thomas women's soccer. How are they feeling right now? Because their season is kind of going almost in the opposite direction as the men. We'll get to the men here in a little bit, but the men, obviously started with, I believe, an 0-11 or 0-11-2 start. They've won 2 matches in a row. Whereas the women had a really strong non-conference, but have sort of been sputtering in the conference slate so far. But being that it is their first season in D1 too, where are the St. Thomas women at in terms of confidence level and how they're feeling about the season right now?
I mean, the St. Thomas team, Annie Williams and I chatted with their head coach, Sheila McGill, earlier this fall. Mark interviewed a couple of their sort of most productive freshmen a couple weeks back, and I chatted with a couple of veterans tonight. I mean, maybe it's a honeymoon period thing. Maybe it's just like they're all really good at like saying the same things, but it seems like they just have a really good team culture in terms of sort of team first. Really supporting each other, really having sort of a, like on the show, I think the phrase like no drama came up like 10 times unprompted. So it clearly is something that they all like speak to a lot for them to repeat it that many times. I honestly think, I mean, I don't know if you would have made me guess what their record would be the first year as the only team to ever jump D3 to D1, what their record would be. I would have guessed it'd be bad. So it's hard to say that they have like underperformed. I actually think I've watched them a number of games. I think they compete pretty well. And I think one thing head coach Sheila McGill said to us on a show earlier this fall is that they're not going to park the bus and they're not going to play defense only. And that may seem like a really low bar for someone to state, but for those who don't follow women's college soccer, I don't know if men's college soccer does this, but in women's college soccer, even at D1, a large percentage of teams play a defend and counter style, and they play we are going to keep the score low. We're going to take our chances. We're going to be disciplined in our shape. And it's honestly like a third of teams play that way. And they force you to score goals. And Sheila from the beginning said, we're not going to do that because that's not fun. We are going to attack even if we lose. And so they do defend a large track of games because they are outmatched because they're brand new, but they're not only defending. They're not deciding to only sit back. And so I think that's why some of their positive culture subsists throughout the year. Because players are not just told like stay behind. So I think they've had a pretty positive environment out there. I think what will be interesting to see is how they build from this year, because the Summit League, even though it's a mid-major, is honestly really tough to crack that upper echelon. It's really tough to get into the range where Denver is, where SDSU is, where these programs who are just constantly winners. I mean, like being winners in that league, it doesn't matter your judgment of like which conferences matter. Being a winner in that league is hard. It's really hard. So I'm curious to see what tactics they take in trying to, do they focus on adding attacking talent? Do they focus on the midfield because they need to try and stabilize the middle third, whatever. So they've had a good vibe so far. And I think rightfully, because they've been at least competitive in these games, even as the record doesn't look super shiny.
Do you get a sense that attacking style maybe is kind of maybe a reason why they were able to not necessarily get out on the front foot, but maybe relative to maybe what some of the expectations were, especially relative to how the men started the season, that attacking style sort of maybe caught teams by surprise early on, maybe, and they were surprised that they were getting outscored by a team like St. Thomas?
I think that can be part of it. I think part of it too was just that they actually did defend pretty well. I mean, as much as I say they didn't focus on like only defending and only sitting back, they actually did have really, I think, pretty disciplined defensive shape. And that can be really hard when you're playing a team that throws numbers forward, or when you're defending in the counterattack, or when you're just defending against a team that has played together before. I mean, like,
Yeah.
St. Thomas has 11 freshmen. Like, this is technically their first D1 recruiting class, even though I'm sure players kind of knew as they were filtering in. And so it's a weird mix of players. Like, it's hard to play together. And so I think they caught teams by surprise because they just played pretty solid soccer, worked their butts off. And then frankly, like, college soccer is a grind. There's a little bit of a wild card factor. I think it takes a really, really, really good team to sort of always play your best week in and week out. Like, it's very rare to have a college soccer team that plays their best week in and week out because it's a really hard
Yeah.
schedule. The rules are hard. You have to play extra time, even though you can still tie. Like, some of the things are just bonkers that exist in
Yeah.
college soccer, and to survive that season is just really hard.
How has the adjustment been for St. Thomas from a D3 to D1 standpoint? I mean, we talked about the results on the field, but I mean, in terms of recapping kind of how the season has gone so far, do you get a sense of, are they surpassing their own expectations for themselves? How is the morale, and how satisfied, I guess, are they with how this season has gone so far?
Yeah, it's really funny because there's like multiple dynamics that sort of cut across each other. On the one sense, as a D3 team, they were super, super, super successful on paper, statistically, with their record. Alex Balfour, who's a senior captain this year, was a D3 All-American. I mean, like, as shiny as it gets as a MIAC athlete, and they just have not been winning. So, like, Olivia Grotman, the sophomore keeper, who's had actually, I think, a really good year, said she's never lost as much in her entire life, and they've lost all of, whatever, like 11 games or whatever the number is. Not a crazy number, but like, for her, it's the most she's ever lost. But they just, honestly, they have almost an outrageously positive attitude. Like, they're all so positive about it. I think part of it is going in knowing the year would be hard, and so your expectations are not crazy. And part of it is that the head coach Sheila McGill is like so incredibly laser focused on, like, not talking about individual success, not talking about like cosmetic success. And so it's almost like this overwhelmingly like team focused, put in the work, do things right type thing, where honestly all the players I've talked to are fully bought in. So as much as I talk about it being really sort of all the way to one side of the strategy scale, I think it's part of why they've been able to keep a good attitude. And then I also think they've had moments of success. Like, they had their win, their first ever Summit League win. And I think they have a really good chance to get one tomorrow against North Dakota. And so I think in a tough year, when you have those moments of success, or when you can cheer on a teammate who scored their fourth goal, or you can cheer on someone who got their first goal, or I think they've just found ways to be positive, and I think they're rightful to be, because as a Summit League team in the Twin Cities, they have a unique opportunity to pull a talent pool and be competitive, even if they're not ever on the range of like a Power 5 team or whatever. They can actually be really successful just by being what they are, which is a mid-major team that's based in the Twin Cities that happens to produce an insane amount of D1 women's college soccer players.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Matt, as we mentioned, you just chatted with Olivia Grotman and Alex Balfour from St. Thomas just before that we started our conversation here. So if you're watching this and you want to watch that conversation, feel free to check that out after we're done here. But Matt, your main beat for Equal Time Soccer is the Gopher Women's Soccer beat. So we're going to transition and kind of recap the roller coaster season that the Gophers had. I mean, you start with an undefeated non-conference run, and then you sort of run into this gauntlet of a Big Ten season. Was it known how good the Big Ten was going to be this year before the season started? Like, did we know that it was going to be this strong?
Yeah, I think the Big Ten is always really tough. I do think this year in particular, it was bizarrely deep, even compared to a regular year. I think there was a really strange dynamic in the Big Ten where it really, the middle class drifted even more south than you would think. Like there is a jumble in the middle of like you could end up being fourth or eighth, but there's
Mhm.
not usually a jumble where you could be fourth or 10th. Like
Yeah.
it really, because Minnesota, that was Minnesota's situation. Like when
Yep.
Minnesota won their first 7 and all 7 were clean sheets. On paper, their non-conference slate was not that impressive. Although it should be noted that Baylor ended up being like a top 50 RPI team, and they beat them in their opening game. You know,
Mhm.
they beat other teams that went on to have solid seasons, all that stuff. But on paper, it was not the strongest non-conference slate Minnesota has ever had. They won all 7, but they weren't really scoring yet. And the
Mhm.
funny thing is, it's one of the only times where the scoring really picked up once they got to Big Ten play. The Big
Yeah.
Ten in any sport is not known as like a high flying, high scoring like conference. And so Minnesota for much of the year was leading the Big Ten in scoring, which is just nuts. That has not been the case for the last several years. I don't even know if it was the case back when we had Big Ten forwards of the year. Like, I don't remember
Mhm.
that being the vibe of the Minnesota team. But this year, just enough players clicked. You know, they really, at their best, looked so damn fun. Like, I kept
Yeah.
tweeting all caps, like, so damn fun all the time because I know that not enough people are watching this team. And I will just tell you, anytime I see people heartbreakingly tweeting about the Loons or heartbreakingly tweeting about the men's national team, I basically want to quote tweet every one of those things and be like, have you watched Raylan Baker yet? Like
Yeah.
it's these things of like, listen, if you want to have fun watching soccer, there are 3 Gophers who will never break your heart. They will always make you feel joy, and they will at least mostly perform. It's this funny thing where you know, they came in hot, but were not even playing their best yet. Then had those, like
Mhm.
you said, the tough sled in the Big Ten play, and then really hit their stride. And then, you know, I think it's just the nature of college soccer and the nature of um, a really tough end of the season. They dropped their last 2 games, and if they would have won both, they honestly could have hosted a Big Ten tournament game, but instead they're out of the Big Ten tournament. Um, but all in all, I think if you would have told Erin Chastain her first ever year coaching the program, they would have had a winning record. They would have had wins over Penn State, Ohio State, Baylor, you know, et cetera, and 5-0 win over Illinois, like all these big time score lines. I think she probably would have been, if you had her on a lie detector test, she probably would have been happy. I will tell you, I was getting my hopes up, man, in the middle of that season. This team really felt special, and I think they actually are special. And I say that because they're not really losing that many players.
Mhm.
Most of their seniors are coming back next year. And so I'm actually already pre-excited about a season that won't start until August. Like it's going to be fun. So folks who are watching now, like honestly, just put in the very back of your head for the first time ever to like follow this team because they're going to be really fun again.
What were your expectations for this team going in, Matt? Because it was this weird dynamic that like you have a new head coach, but the coaching change wasn't due to lack of performance or, you know, whatever. It was simply a coach moving on and another coach taking over a program that seemed in relatively healthy shape. But at the same time, it's still a new coach, probably putting in a new philosophy, maybe new tactical system. Considering all those dynamics, what were your expectations for this team this season?
I mean, and I will seem like such a fool now because they were picked 10th in the Big Ten by the coaches, and I honestly thought that was way too low, and they ended up finishing
Mhm.
10th. I mean, like I just have to eat
Mhm.
crow, but honestly, I think this team was way better than that. I don't think anyone who watched them could really think they were actually the 10th best team. I think um, I expected them to finish honestly like more like 5th or 6th, and they really, if they would have just won 2 winnable games at the end of the year, would have finished at worst 7th and, you know, as high as 4th. I really think that's the quality they had. I do think, and this is like, it's kind of weird to try and put in a caveat or like a complaint of when players were missing and blah blah blah. But for instance, their very last game against Nebraska, they absolutely like had the class to beat Nebraska. Their right back, or their left back got injured in warmups. Like that's
Oh,
honestly, that rarely happens to the Gophers. I don't
yeah.
think I've ever seen a player get like hurt in warmups. Like That's not a normal thing. So that happened. That's not the reason they lost. It's just a reason. And then they had a really random thing in the middle of the year where Kenzie Langdock got COVID, even though she was vaccinated, and she missed 3 games. And 3 of those games were the loss against Michigan State, who they could have won on the road, the loss against Wisconsin by 1 goal, and they could have won that at home. And one other game I'm forgetting. So it's kind of like there were actually some sort of, if you go back in time, could this have been different moments? But otherwise, honestly, what happened, my expectations were higher. I thought they would be better, but at the same time, I both thought they would be better and didn't think they would show as well as they did. Like,
Yeah.
they win against Ohio State. They go down 2 goals, score 4 in a row. Like, are you kidding me? Like, on the road, like against a very good team. They put 4 up against Penn State, are just housing them. I mean, like, those games were so damn fun. Like, they were so fun. Like, it was crazy how fun this team was in moments this year. And that just is not always the case. I mean, like, soccer, even a really good team, you don't always see a 4-goal game. Like, that just is like bonkers town.
And that's such a weird, because you hit the nail on the head, Matt. It's like you both didn't expect this team to play as well as they did, but you expect them to finish higher, and that's kind of how I feel too. It's like I honestly didn't look at the standings before we started this. I knew they were out of the Big Ten tournament picture. I didn't know they were 10th, and that just like baffling to me because I mean you're talking about SC top 10 caliber goals. You're talking about like an attacking front that was one of the best in the Big Ten. You're talking about a borderline brick wall and Megan Plachko. It's just it just feels like this team couldn't put it together for a consistent amount of games, a consistent enough amount of games, I should say, to really kind of ride that high.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting what you mentioned before, Jeremy, that, you know, Aaron Chastain came in middle of June, but you can't talk to players until training camp, or you can talk to them, but you can't coach them. So there was no time to build a system. 3 of the defenders on the Gopher back line were not defenders. They were forwards and midfielders, including a freshman midfielder who started at center back every game of the year and was a baller, by the way, Elizabeth Overberg. And she's a speech nerd for all the nerds out there. So like respect. And she's jacked. She had a great picture where she's like flexing. And so she is equal times jacked nerd for sure.
There you go.
I just think there was not a lot of time to build in this system. So for instance, they played a standard diamond 4-4-2 to simplify roles. I do not think that is the pinnacle system that Aaron Chastain wants to use. I would expect them to come in with a 4-3-3 that has maybe more pressing elements, maybe more creative elements. And so it's just worth noting. I mean, it is fair to say they didn't have a ton of time to build chemistry. I honestly, like, players are absolutely raving about Aaron as a head coach. Like, it is beyond the point of just like BS honeymoon period stuff. Like, I'm talking to players a ton. It is very real how they're speaking about her. I think it speaks volumes that 4 seniors are coming back for an extra year after only 1 came back last season. Like, just saying. So like, I think that speaks volumes. And I think this team's going to be fun as hell. So yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's transition. Actually, before we transition, I want to talk to you about just some of the attendance numbers that we saw at ELR this season. You talked about the people crying about the Loons on Twitter, but I mean, there were people going out and showing out for this team this season. And I think the performances on the field, while again, we talk about they finished 10th in the conference, the performances on the field, you put together those, people come back, right? How did this groundswell of attendance support, has it always been there and we just really haven't seen it at the forefront, or was this season sort of, I wouldn't say abnormal, but surprising in the in-person support that we saw for the Gophers?
Yeah, so I mean, first I would say if you're a soccer fan and you've never been to Elizabeth Lowry Stadium, go to one game. Like, I grew up in northern Minnesota. I went to college in western Minnesota. I had never even heard of the Gopher soccer team before I lived here. I went to my very first game in like 2016. I'm not judging anyone. Like, because I had never been to a game either. If you have never been to a game there, you have to go to a game. The pitch is better than Allianz Field. It is the best pitch in the state. I don't think it's very close. The stadium is immaculate. It is so cool. It is so fun. The only downside is they do not serve beer in the stadium, but guess what? Half the time I bring a cooler of beer that you can drink for free in the parking lot. So you're good.
There you go.
So you do not need game time beer. I will pregame beer you. Or frankly, the Gopher player parents will pregame beer you because they are so cool. But this is, I just think so for reference, if you've never been to a game, you do need to try one game. It is so fun to watch soccer there. It's an outdoor stadium, beautiful grass field. I think probably one of the best, soccer specific venues, certainly that you will be able to get to as a Minnesotan. For reference, they have always been in the range of like the top 25 in terms of attendance. They usually have anywhere from 600 to 800 fans a game. Again, that's like in some of the top programs across the country. So they've always sold well in terms of fans. This year was a little bit different. I don't have like the official numbers, but I will tell you, I think the Penn State game, they had 1,800 fans. They added a couple bleachers, which was so fun to see. The Wisconsin game, they said they had 1,300 fans. I mean, like, it is, when it is full, like the Robbie is so fun. And I am such a believer that stadium could be expanded even further. Like they could actually add, because right now it's one really nice set of stands on one side. And they really could either wrap or just add away stands on another side of the field. And so the fan support was awesome. I mean, like this, that was cool. I do think some of it, honestly, might have just been Erin. I mean, like Erin Chastain, for those who don't know, is an alum. She played for the team in the 90s. She's a Minnesota kid. She, like, very much so in her interviews when she got this job, talked about how it was a big deal for her to come home. It's home was like a big part of like the team's branding and saying like, this is our home, this is where we're from, all those things. So I do think there was frankly a lot of alums like from Erin's era who were like, hell yeah, let's go like support Erin. So I do honestly think part of the bump was literally just her. And then I do think part of the bump was sort of this is an outdoor sports venue where we can go support like soccer and we know people who play there and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's a great game day experience. I mean, if you have not been there, just try one game. That's what I would say.
All right, let's transition into what's happening with Minnesota women's soccer. So you guys have, I believe, 7 names that you've whittled it down to, correct? You guys in the semifinal period. When are we going to get the next, I guess, cut of names?
Yeah, so the Minnesota women's soccer team it's a minor league like women's soccer team that will have top level college players, aspiring pros. They will play in sort of those summer months. We have been doing some community branding, as you said, Jeremy. So I believe the voting closed for those 7 names. So now we have like a top 3 and 4. There we go. Look at those 7 or 8. No, 7. Yeah, I'm a great. Look at how good of a reader I am. So 7 names. And so those will now be the top 3. The top getting names are now going to be built out by a really, really great group of designers, 3 women. One of them is a former Gopher soccer player, Ali Renke, who folks have probably seen getting promoted by the team. So 3 women are building out those brands into something that will be presented that the community owners can vote on, like a fully built out brand. So like, not just the name, but what are the colors? What are the fonts? What are the sort of mascot feels? What is the vibe? What kind of textures are we seeing? And what sort of some example merch? And so those will be voted on in November because we want to make sure that brand is finalized in time to really start doing some high level kit design. Make sure those are out so folks can start buying some merch so that by the time they go to games, May of 2022, they're already geared out and ready to rock and support these women. And honestly, it's just been a complete and absolute blast. I mean, more than 2,500 people have become community owners.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's been great. I mean, it's super, super fun to see folks showing out for women's soccer in Minnesota. It's super, super cool to see them putting where their money where their mouth is too. And like that part has just been an absolute blast because all of that money that they're investing gets to go into these women players who are just, if anyone has followed my work, they know that like these women are just complete badasses and they deserve investment. They deserve to be marketed for the players that they are. And so it's just going to be a cool experience.
Absolutely. Which now that voting's closed, I don't know if we need to necessarily worry about you skewing the vote here. Which name's your favorite, Matt? I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
This is a really boring answer that I'm sure you're happy to hear. I honestly think the name is important, but I'm even more excited about the brand. Like I think the name, an example I give is like how many times do people say Minnesota United FC? Like how many times does someone say the official full name? I think the really cool thing about naming a soccer team is it does matter insofar as it informs the brand and it informs the identity. But the cool thing about soccer fan culture is like supporters will come up with nicknames for the team. They will come up with their own supporters groups. They will come up with how they want to refer to this thing that they love. And actually, so I will tell you as someone who got to see at least like the mood boards of the brands, all of them are so damn cool. Like I was sitting literally at the same table, like looking at my screen, losing my mind, like so jacked about these designs these women had only started. And so I personally think it's been really, really fun to see like how the voting changes around too of like who shifts to what, who cares about what. And that's been the fun part about having the community do this process because I just think it's a cool way to harness people's energy of like, if people care about what the team name is, like give them a voice, like let them weigh in. So I think that's been the fun part.
I believe that Dominic, I believe both of our number ones are still on the list. Hopefully they're still on the list after the next round of cuts.
What are they? Let's hear it.
Dominic, do you remember yours?
Well, weren't both of our 1 and 2 switched between Arctic and Iron? Was that what it was?
Yeah. So you had Arctic as number 1 and Iron as 2. I had Iron as 1 and Arctic as 2.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we'll have to see. I'm not going to give any clues. I'm gonna keep neutral.
Well, it's funny you brought up like the branding and seeing sort of the mock-ups of how some of this stuff could look, because that's honestly when we were picking our favorites, like a lot of our reasoning had to do with like, oh, this would really be a good potential, like, branding that they can make from this would be really, there's a lot of potential there. It could be really cool,
Right.
And I'm sure the same could be said about every single one of those names, right? But like for us, like it just like in our minds, we're like, oh, like Iron Minnesota, like that to me, like that sparks like a really cool like hype video of like,
I mean that same reasoning is at a root of sort of what we're passionate about. I mean, we want a ton of merch, like different options for merch. We want multiple kits. We want, like the Forward Madison example of give people cool stuff to wear, because if they want to support the club, you need to give them ways to support the club. And you need to give people ways that feels authentic to them, that they can walk around in their daily life and represent the club they care about. And so that is a huge part of why we want a strong brand, why we want a brand that's informed by fans, because they deserve to have cool stuff. Like they deserve to have cool stuff that if they're going to spend money, it should be cool. They should want to wear it. And it should be something where like when they wear it, then like someone says, oh, what's that club? And they get to brag about their favorite player, and they get to brag about the game day, and they get to brag about, oh, Minnesota's team is better than your team. Like that's part of the environment of, you have to give people something they can support, and then you have to give them ways to support it. So I think that's the most fun part, is getting thousands of votes on stuff like this is so it's like both stressful but exciting, because it shows that they care. And if people care, like that's the main thing. I mean, like if people are passionate, you're already halfway there.
Definitely. So aside from the name and the branding, which obviously we're going to get soon, we're at least going to get finalists of soon. You're less than 7 months from taking the field. I believe May 2022 is when the USLW League season starts. When can we expect kind of more announcements as far as, acquisition, roster, stadium, different things like that? When can we expect to start hearing those details?
Yeah, so right now we're in the process of interviewing head coach candidates. So we had that application window open earlier, like literally every day this week. I'm talking to really great coaching candidates for us. And then I think we really want the head coach to play a key role in making some of those final decisions in terms of game venue, in terms of a lot of things that impact the actual soccer. Because to this point, we've spent 18 months creating a club from nothing to make sure that we can allow community input and get community investment and things that really don't necessarily have to do with the soccer on the field. And now we're getting to the phase like you spoke to, Jeremy, where the schedule's coming up in only 7 months, where now it's the soccer. And so now it's this fun phase where someone like me who nerds out over who we recruit and who's on our staff and all these things and who we're playing and all these things is starting to come into play. So I think, from this point on, it's frankly only going to be really exciting announcements for folks because we're going to be locking in our head coach. We're going to be building out that coaching staff. We're going to be getting players committed and announcing them. I mean, like basically now through the season is only going to be like stuff. Like everything is going to be happening now. So, the branding will get announced. The head coach will be announced. We'll unveil our first kit. We'll be unveiling players. We'll be holding tryouts so that we can actually have a broad access to the talent that exists in this community. And then we'll be starting to unveil the schedule, and then you'll be able to get your ticket. So like everything is going to be happening like from now on. And so it's starting to feel very real, I will say.
Do you guys know where you're going to play your home games yet? You have a few options.
So that's still being finalized. We do want to make sure it can be a really good game day environment. I think we want to make sure folks can feel like it's a professional, fully built out setting. I personally, hope it's somewhat centrally located. We want folks to be able to get there. And first and foremost, we want it to be a really good environment for the players. So like, do we have high quality field? Do we have a high quality stadium? Do we have good facilities in terms of locker rooms? Physical treatment, all these things that players need to make sure that it doesn't feel like we're just driving out to a pitch in the middle of nowhere where they don't have the support they need. So it's a pre-professional league. The players will not be paid, but we want every single element we can invest into to be invested in so that they have a professional environment. So it's still to be debated. What we're doing now is doing our homework to make sure we know all our options so that by the time the head coach is in place, they basically sort of have all the information, she can have by the time she's, helping us decide those things.
All right. Well, we'll be looking out for those announcements here in the coming months. It's going to be really exciting times, obviously, to be following Minnesota women's soccer on Twitter and all the other socials. It's at Woso everywhere, right?
Yep. And if folks, haven't heard of us before and they heard about us now, if folks want to throw their 2 cents literally into the team, you can go to wefunder.com/MNWoso. Otherwise, MNWoso on any of the social channels, if you want to check out the team and see what the team is about, for sure.
All right. I know we're getting pretty late here, Matt, but I do want to touch on what's happening in Division 2. We do like to kind of give a spotlight to what's happening in some of the lower divisions of college soccer. Your brother does an excellent job. Your brother Mark does an excellent job on the NSIC beat for Equal Time Soccer. 2 teams ranked in the United Soccer Coaches National D2 poll this week. Bemidji State's been there all season. Minnesota State Mankato now cracking the top 25 as well. Bemidji State 13-0-2 on the year. If you can kind of give me the cliff notes here, Matt, what's made them so dominant this year?
I mean, Bemidji State is a real success story just because the NSIC, I mean, D2 is really tough. I talk about college soccer as a category, but like D2 is also a slog. They only have, the equivalent of like 7.7 scholarships allowed. And most teams don't actually invest enough to give that many scholarships. Just as a heads up, like there's a very big difference between the teams that offer 7.7 scholarships and the ones that offer less. Think about adding the equivalent of like 4 full scholarship players onto a team. Like that's what some of these teams deal with. So Bemidji, I will just say without giving too much away, is not one of the programs that gets the absolute most financial investment from their department. And so they are a huge success story. And Coach Jim Stone has done a good job developing that team. And they and Mankato this year are just, the class of the league. I mean, it's a really tough table. They actually, similar to the Big Ten, have had this sort of funny thing where a lot of teams, the schedules are sort of truncated, where a bunch of people played the one half of the table first half, and then a bunch played the second half. So it's kind of like for example, Minot State and University of Mary, both North Dakota schools, sort of played their easily slate early. And so they were undefeated, top of the table, looked like they were rolling, but it's really because of who they played when. And so Bemidji State and Minnesota State down in Mankato, they played their hard teams early, and now they're playing the quote unquote more winnable games late. And so that's why you're seeing them charge up the table. If you've only seen our tweets about like the standings, they've been just like running the table. And that's also why at the bottom, so the top 8 teams make the NSIC tournament. This is a super competitive conference. It's actually pretty darn fun to watch. And if you live in Minnesota, you have a school within driving range of you because there are a ton of programs.
For sure.
So the bottom of the tournament field is really, really tight. So for instance, the top 7 schools all have 20 points, but the 8th, to get the 8th spot, there's multiple teams all within 3 points of that. So Wayne State, Upper Iowa, St. Cloud State. So if you're a Minnesota fan, and we're a Minnesota site, St. Cloud State is within shooting distance of claiming that last tournament spot. And so I personally, I know Mark in his last piece said, we're going to go all Minnesota. We're going to say they have the juice to make that spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And honestly, it's kind of nuts because their regular season runs later than D1. So they still have regular season games to play, even though the Big Ten is in tournament play already. So by the time the NSI tournament is happening, if it's hosted in Bemidji, in northern Minnesota, 2 weeks,
everybody's going to be traveling.
It is just, and it's just like Snowtown. I mean, they play in blizzards up there. It is crazy up there. And this is coming from someone who grew up 40 minutes south of Bemidji. It is crazy to be playing soccer midway through November in Bemidji, and they just do it. They just make it work. So if folks have not watched the NSIC, my number one selling point is nearly all of these games are free to stream online. Just try one out. Just check it out. Bemidji, Mankato, Augustana. I mean, Concordia has traditionally been really good right here in St. Paul where I live. St. Cloud has been traditionally good. But there's just a ton of competitive programs, and D2 soccer, it's scholarship soccer, man. There's ballers there. And it can be fun to watch, even if it's sometimes it can be a scrappy game. If you're playing, literally in snow, it still can be a fun game.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading some of the work that Mark was doing earlier in the season, and talking about kind of Bemidji State getting out front, and so I was checking out a couple of Bemidji State games, and that's some high quality soccer that they're playing right now, and even more impressive now that you've let on that they're not taking advantage of their full scholarship usage or what they're allotted, I guess. Right. And that just makes it all the more impressive that you're seeing this sort of product on the field at that level. And just I watched maybe a half. I watched the full match, but after 30, 40 minutes, I'm like, oh, there's a reason why this team is, whatever 0-2 that they were at the time, because they're just dominating.
Well, and it's this funny dynamic in Minnesota, for folks who really want to get into it. The really funny thing is almost all of the D3 schools in Minnesota are private schools. So Morris, where I went, is, Rep Morris, somewhere in a Cougar jersey. Morris, nice. Where I went, is the only public D3 school in the state. Every other D3 school is a private, where it's, minimum 30 grand, probably more like 40 or 50. And so, to be really honest, it's not that accessible of a place to go without sending folks into pretty significant debt unless they have the means to go there on their own. So the funny thing is, in many states, that dynamic is flipped. So in Minnesota, D2 schools are almost all state schools. So they're really affordable. Bemidji, Mankato, UMD, Marshall, St. Cloud, Winona, Moorhead. Like, I could go on. Like, we are drowning in D2 state schools where you're playing at a higher level and it's actually more affordable. And so it's just this very funny dynamic where if you're getting offered a walk-on offer in D1 or a small scholarship at a private school, and then you have to pay the remainder of that $60,000 tuition fee, like, good players go to Minnesota D2 schools because they're affordable, they're solid academically, and they compete. So, like, Minnesota has its share of D2 talent for those reasons, because it's a bunch of public schools where it's like, it's 17 grand even if you get no scholarships. Like, it's an affordable place to go to school. So I just think we're really lucky to have that very specific dynamic, because I don't think other states have that dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Matt Pravatsky, Equal Time Soccer, equaltimesoccer.com, at Equal Time Soccer on Twitter. Matt, the work you guys do at Equal Time is awesome. I love having you on to talk women's soccer. I mean, you're like my go-to. I just got to shoot you a DM on Twitter like, hey, we're talking women's soccer. Do you want to jump on? So it's good to have your voice along with us, man. We appreciate the time as always.
Thanks so much, Jeremy, Dominic. I love how you all amplify, other programs, other sites, other folks. If someone's going to try and cover everything in the state of Minnesota, which is an insanely ambitious thing that you all do, amplifying folks who are doing good work is something I really appreciate. So thanks so much. Always happy to join.
Well, we need all the assistance we can get in that pursuit, Matt. So we appreciate it.
Nice.
All right. Have a good night, man. Take it easy.
Thanks.
Matt Pravatsky from Equal Time Soccer. Definitely recommend going to equaltimesoccer.com and checking out what they're doing. They also have a Patreon you can go to support the work that they're doing there. Just awesome stuff. All right, Dom, been an hour and 15 minutes. I do want to spend probably another 15. I think we'll probably try to hit 8:30 as our benchmark to get out of here. But we do have a couple of more topics we need to get to, starting with high school soccer. We mentioned last week that we were going to have kind of more of a general idea on who could potentially be going to US Bank Stadium for the semifinals of both the boys and girls soccer tournaments at all divisions. And now we have that mostly set in place, right?
Yep, and there's some games that have gone on tonight that we won't have all the updates on that, but a pretty large portion of both the boys and girls brackets are filled out now.
Awesome. So who do we have locked in? Let's start with the boys side. Who do we have locked in?
All right, so I'll just go Class A, AA, AAA in that order. So the first part of this bracket actually hasn't been decided yet, but the winner of Southwest Christian and Proctor will play the winner of St. Cloud Cathedral versus Pine Island / Zimbrota. Rochester Lords beat St. Paul Washington Technology, so they will play the winner of St. Paul Humboldt. I don't know how to say all these words. Versus Metro Schools College Prep. So again, that's Rochester versus St. Paul Humboldt or Metro Schools College Prep. For AA, Orono will play the winner of Wilmer and Worthington. And then Mahtomedi will play the winner of Academy of Holy Angels or St. Cloud Tech. AAA got these are all set already. The semifinals for AAA are all set. So Rochester Mayo will play Mounds View, and Duluth East will play Rosemount. By the way, for I just thought this before we started here, for Ted Lasso fans, Duluth East are the Greyhounds. So
nice. There you go.
There's your school to cheer for, unless you already have another school. And then for girls, for the single A, Holy Family Catholic will play the winner of St. Anthony Village versus Brecht School, and Minnehaha Academy plays Cotter. AA, Benilde St. Margaret's plays Cloquet Carleton, and Academy of Holy Angels again play the winner of Mahtomedi or Mankato West. And then AAA, Edina plays Stillwater, and Centennial play the winner of Rosemount versus Elk River. So a lot of interesting matchups, and there are a lot of different areas being represented, which is always fun. some schools up where I am at, obviously in cities, and just a good portion of the state being represented for both boys and girls.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's a week between the quarterfinals and the semifinals, right? So this weekend off, and then it's the following weekend where we get the semifinals and the finals at the bank, right?
Yeah. So they're the third and the fourth. So they're not in that weekend, but yes, they're about a week from
Next
now.
week.
So
Okay, cool.
yeah. So that's Wednesday and Thursday, and then the finals are, I believe, they're all going to be the sixth. And again, all those games are at US Bank Stadium.
It's just fun soccer to go watch, even if you don't
Yep.
necessarily have a team there. I mean, it's a lot of fun if one of your teams is playing, like one of your alma maters is playing. I mean, it's so much fun. But if you just enjoy soccer, like it's such a cool atmosphere there. And again, I think it's going to be kind of extra tuned up this year because we didn't get this last year. Right? We
Right.
didn't get this environment. We didn't get semifinals and finals really at all. It ended after sectionals last year because of COVID protocols and stuff. So it really is a return to having that atmosphere. And I think because we had that year off, it's just going to be turned up to another notch. So a lot of fun stuff.
For sure. And yeah, an example of that is actually last year. Last year there were sectional titles awarded, but there was no state tournament. So I remember last year I covered Cloquet Carleton, the girls team, for the Pine Journal. They won their sectional title, and they were a very good team. They were fun to watch, but they had nothing to follow that up with. So there, for example, getting into the semifinals this year for AA, that's a huge opportunity. One that they didn't know one, but teams like them who had a lot of potential didn't get to have. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of focus for clear reasons on professional or collegiate soccer, but you looked at the great energy that was at the Mayor's Cup this year and games like that. That's a great example of you can still have a lot of fun, a lot of sense of community, and actually a lot of quality too, because obviously these are talented kids. That's why they're on these teams. Yeah, just because it's high school doesn't mean it's not going to be fun. There are other high school sports high school football, for example, gets a lot of hype actually. That same energy can be in other sports, certainly other team sports. So if you have a connection to one of these schools, you should definitely check how they do out. But if you happen to just be able to watch or be in the area or anything, I suggest following along.
And so again, the semifinals at US Bank Stadium, Wednesday and Thursday next week, the 3rd and the 4th, and then Saturday all day long, the state championships there at US Bank Stadium. You can get tickets at the door. I'm sure you can buy them ahead online. I have no idea how much they are. I can't imagine they're expensive at all. So definitely, and it's a good way to support soccer at that level and go out and take in a really, really cool soccer environment. So definitely implore everybody who can to go and do that. All right, our final topic, and then we will shout out our friends over at Stimulus Athletic. But the final topic is one I saved for last because it's a very momentous moment in Minnesota soccer history. And that's the St. Thomas men getting their first Division I victory. They believe they started 0-11-2 heading into that. And I mean, it's their jump to D1. It was not, I wouldn't say it was expected, but it's not surprising that the growing pains were kind of at that level. But they had been playing well the entire season. And so you just had to know that this was going to be coming. And so they get that first win last week against University of Nebraska Omaha. And what's, I think, impressive to me is the defensive work they did. They withstood 19 shots from Omaha to secure this win. Just a very, very cool moment, but also I think just a well-deserved win for a team that had been playing pretty well considering the jump they had they had made this season.
Yeah, and we've talked in previous episodes about this, but it's worth noting again. Obviously, their actual record did not look especially great, but they were not being blown out by other teams. No. They were being relatively competitive throughout. Obviously, they got a couple draws previously that were, obviously they were close games, but they were low scoring, kind of back and forth draws. So, it always felt like this was coming. And we've had conversations between us and with John, obviously, early on in the season about the expectations and sort of the focus, not necessarily on results, but on growing culture and developing as a program. But it always felt like eventually this would happen. So, they probably would have liked for it to be a little earlier than it ended up being, but it's great that it's happened at all. And it probably is the last piece in that puzzle of feeling like they did what they needed to do this season.
Freshman Ferris Kolick is the one who got the goal in the 12th minute that ended up being the deciding goal in the 1-0 victory over Omaha. He's from Ramsey, Minnesota. And again, we talk about the freshmen making impacts for St. Thomas, both on the men's and women's side. I mean, that's kind of needed when you're talking about bringing in these D1 recruiting classes. You're going to need to get them integrated right away because you want them to sort of to get that time on the pitch. So that way, when you get to their junior and senior years, your third and fourth seasons as a D1 school, you're sort of ready to start competing on a wider level, on a more consistent basis, right? And super shout out here to senior goalkeeper Nicholas Martinson. Again, we're talking senior goalkeeper here, so this is a guy who is I guess I don't know for sure, but brought in as a D3 prospect, as a D3 recruit. 8 saves in the win. Just very, very impressive. Like I said, the team all withstood 19 shots as a whole from Omaha, but they come away with the 1-0 victory. And not only do they get their first win, but they follow that right up with their second win. Now, this was not a conference win like the game against Omaha, but it was impressive going to UW Milwaukee and coming out with another 1-0 victory. This time, it was a 33rd minute goal from freshman Charlie Holton off a counter, and that proved the difference. Not necessarily the onslaught of saves needed like it was against Omaha, but you get a first half goal and you shut the door. They did that in both those matches. Really, really impressive performances in both of these matches. Well-deserved victories. And now all of a sudden you got a winning streak on your hands.
Yeah. And going back to you just mentioned this, and Matt was obviously talking quite a bit about it with the women's program. It's just really encouraging to see both the men's and women's programs really finding their feet in terms of just the baseline of development. It's not necessarily about having great records, but it's about finding those fundamentals, getting those freshmen in, finding some good results. But aside from that, just getting good programs growing at this new level, which is such a challenge, particularly because of how far they leapt up into D1. I think it's when all's said and done, if you don't have context and you see the records, you're probably going to go, okay, well, that wasn't a great season for either of those sides. But with context, I think you see how both the men's and women's sides did this year, and you think, okay, I should be excited for the next 5 years of Tommy soccer. I should be paying attention to how this goes for the next several years. I should be paying attention to these freshmen who are clearly very good. And that seemed like that's what the coaches really wanted to achieve in the first place, was just to get the platform there for future excitement and enjoyment. Yeah. So that's really exciting to have in St. Paul.
Yeah, and you have the excitement for obviously like that first home match, right? It's that in itself. I mean, you had you had a kind of a jersey presentation for Minnesota United, from Minnesota United, I should say, at the beginning of the match. You had mayor and governor there and all that stuff. So obviously momentous occasion there, but obviously the losing streak that excitement starts to falter when you're not winning games, and that's understanding that's sports, right? But now you got 2 wins in a row, and now you're coming back at home on Saturday afternoon. You take on UMKC in St. Paul, and now you're looking for your 3rd straight win if you're St. Thomas. I mean, if there's ever a time, Matt had talked about going out and supporting the Gophers and going out and supporting these women's teams. If there's ever a time to go out and support St. Thomas and support the only D1 men's program, I mean, why not now? Why not really try to push this team to get not only a few wins under the belt, but a few conference wins under the belt? Maybe they don't finish in the conference basement, right? Again, this is all theoretical, or hypothetical, probably both.
One of those.
But I mean, it's a Saturday afternoon. I think it's, you don't have to go trick-or-treating until Sunday. I just think it's a really, really good opportunity to go out to St. Paul, enjoy some soccer, and cheer on a team who is in really good form right now.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're able to go, and I don't know the pay structure details for St. Thomas Athletics, but if you find yourself able to go, you could end up seeing a pretty momentous moment if they do well that night. And to be honest, even if they don't win, but if they put on a good performance, and the energy they'll have after the last 2 games, yeah, you could be in to see a really entertaining game of soccer. And however that game goes, people should be signing on as interested in what this program is doing. So part of that is as making an effort to try to be there in person sometimes. And with how things are going, you might be able to achieve that and also have a really good moment and see a win. So yeah, I definitely think people should try and check it out.
Should also check out StimulusAthletic.com, the title sponsors of 10,000 Pitches. We would be, I was about to say we'd be nothing without them. That's very intense. I'm not going to say that.
Well, much.
But I mean, it's really, really great to have their support. Honestly, it's part of what propels us to keep going with this podcast, to know that businesses like Stimulus and people like Jason Moore really do, love what we're doing, and we can provide value to them, which is great. So if you're a team, if you're a coach of a team, you're watching this podcast, you're really interested in Minnesota soccer, I implore you to just go check out StimulusAthletic.com, because what Stimulus does is they help outfit teams from a local, national, international level. It doesn't matter. They don't, there's no bar for Stimulus in terms of like, oh, we'll only supply teams at this level, right? Stimulus really, they're focused on local, but they're also focused on providing clubs everywhere quality game gear and apparel at affordable prices. That means jerseys, that means full kits, that means on and off the field apparel, backpacks for your stuff, travel wear, travel gear, like everything across the board. Stimulus Athletic can take care of you. So go to StimulusAthletic.com and you click that Get Started button, and it's free to just talk to the people at Stimulus. That's what we did with the 10K kit that we launched last summer. It was no investment for us to just have the initial conversation with Jason and the people at Stimulus about what's this going to look like? What's the pricing look like? What are we going to get here? How's it going to look? What can you do for us? That sort of thing. That conversation is free to have. So why not just go check them out and see what they can do for you? StimulusAthletic.com. Click that Get Started button. If you do that, make sure you let them know that Jeremy from 10,000 Pitches sent you. But if you are not involved in a soccer club, you're just a fan of Minnesota soccer like we are here on this podcast, you can still rep Stimulus and support a company who's supporting this podcast by checking out some of the athleisure apparel that they have coming soon. We're talking, workout shirts. Athleisure, these are shirts you can wear to the gym, to the bar, to bed, when you're just chilling at home. Doesn't matter. It's great shirts, great pants, just a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe from Stimulus Athletic, not only from a club side, but also from just like a general, hey, I want to buy some stuff that's comfortable side. So check them out, StimulusAthletic.com. Their retail store is opening soon over in Northeast Minneapolis by our friends at 9th Street Soccer and Coffee. So we'll have both our friends at 9th Street and Stimulus kind of right there next to each other in Northeast. That's going to be really, really cool. That's opening in December. It'll also house the new Minneapolis City Club store as well. So a lot of fun stuff going on at Stimulus Athletic. Again, check them out, StimulusAthletic.com, @info_stimulus on Twitter. Cannot thank them enough for being the title sponsors of 10K. An hour and 34 minutes later, the first 10K live. Success, Dom? What do you think?
I think the next time we do this, I'm going to need some Stimulus Athletic athleisure wear, because this is quite a haul. But I'm glad we did it. And I think we'll potentially do this in the future again. And obviously the Loon season's kind of coming to a close, but this probably won't be the last time we do this. And it was great to talk to Matt and everything. So I think it went well.
Yeah, it's a cool dynamic. I obviously big thanks to Matt Pravatsky from Equal Time Soccer for joining us, providing another voice, kind of filling us in on everything going on women's soccer in the state. I like this. I don't know if we'll do this weekly but definitely something that I think we'll come back to every now and then. Just kind of a different way to consume 10K, and a different way for us to interact with you guys while we're talking soccer as well. Make sure you follow us at 10K Pitches on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Stay involved with the conversation. If you would like, if you missed part of the live stream, we'll have the podcast up like we normally do. The YouTube version will be up as just a regular YouTube video after the fact if you want to go check that out. So a lot of ways to consume the whole episode if you missed something here. But for Dominic Jose Bazonio, I'm Jeremy Rushing. Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another different version of 10K this week. And we will catch you next week for another episode of 10K. Post Loons back as normal right here on YouTube and Twitter after the match against SKC on Halloween. A little spooky edition of Post Loons. Maybe I'll be wearing my costume. Who knows? All right.
And to thank Jeremy, we did all this while thinking about the Queen.
Yes. Despite the fact that we are very much thinking about the Queen, you can consider this podcast finished.